Have you ever escaped danger by a split second and no one could explain what saved you? A voice echoed in your mind. A gut feeling made you stop. A coincidence too strange to believe. People call it luck, but the Bible calls it an angel. No halo, no need for wings. Angels don't show up to impress, they come to intervene, to protect, to remind. When you're in despair, when you cry alone in the middle of the night. Welcome to Prayer Station. When you're about to give up, maybe a Holy Spirit stood beside you, not to force you back, but to whisper that you are still loved. Some angels do not sleep. There are angels sent just for you. And today, you'll learn who they are. These are the 9 types of angels in the Bible. Each one carries a mission. Each one connects to a part of your story. If you've ever asked, does God see me? Is there someone guarding my soul? Then the answer is, yes. They've always been there. And now, you're about to know their names. Listen, not just with your ears, but with your soul. Because you were never alone and never will be. You thought only one angel was watching over you. But the truth is, you're living within a sacred order established before the foundation of the world. Not all angels are the same. Not all carry the same mission. Heaven divides, not out of injustice, but by eternal intent. Some angels have never touched the earth. They don't come to deliver messages. They were created only to behold the glory. Some angels bring no good news who take no form. They simply govern the operations of the heavens, restrain chaos, and keep justice echoing. And some angels step into your life. In that moment, you stand between life and death, between letting go and daring to believe. First sphere, the spiritual beings who stand beside the holy throne. No one sees them, no one can summon them, but they are the echo of the cry, holy, holy, holy. They hold the vibration of the cosmos so it won't collapse before the absolute presence of God. Second sphere, the powers that act with divine authority. They are not messengers, they are governors, gatekeepers of realms, resisting darkness, coordinating stars, and holding back the forces of the fallen from overtaking the heavens. Third sphere, the angels you've met without realizing, a kind stranger in the rainy night, a whisper when you were about to do wrong, a near-death escape that made no sense. They were the angels you once thanked without knowing who you were thanking. 3 spheres, 9 types, 1 order, all not to control you but to guard the soul more precious than the universe itself, you. And now we enter each of those realms, starting from the highest, the first angelic sphere, the ones who stand beside the throne. Not all fire is meant to consume. There is a kind of fire not born of matter, not needing oxygen to burn, but it was ignited by the inexhaustible love of God. Seraphim means the burning ones, not because they are being consumed, but because they burn with glory. They don't just cry out 3 times, holy, holy, holy. They are that very song, the swirling fire circling the throne, unceasing, untiring, ageless. When the prophet Isaiah saw them, he fell face down to the ground. His soul melted, not from guilt, but from a holiness too overwhelming to endure. And when he could no longer speak, a seraph came near, carrying a burning coal from the altar, not to destroy him, but to touch his lips, to purify, to turn the language of man into the voice of heaven. Seraphim were not created to approach humans. They were made only to circle God. But if a seraph appears in your life, it doesn't come to comfort, it comes to purify. To burn away what does not belong to him within you, to awaken what you have extinguished. You pray for God to come close, but are you willing to be touched by a burning coal? Because sometimes transformation doesn't come from a sermon, from a burning that reaches the very roots of your soul. Seraphim are the beginning of all divine movement, because all that is true must first pass through the first fire. And if you feel like you're amid a blazing inferno, pause, breathe. What if it's not punishment and but a seraph drawing near? Ready? Let us now move on to the second angel, cherubim, the guardians of light. If seraphim are the fire burning around the throne, then cherubim are the solid foundation upon which glory descends. Not hovering in holiness, they are pillars of presence. They are not cute like Christmas cards. They don't have tiny wings and chubby cheeks like Renaissance paintings. Cherubim are not images to hang on walls. They are living symbols of the divine cosmos. Each cherub has 4 faces: a human face, representing reason; a lion's face, representing power; an ox's face, representing service; an eagle's face, representing vision. And their entire bodies are covered in eyes, not to look at you, to never miss a single movement of the one they serve. When Adam and Eve sinned, it was cherubim who were sent with a flaming, turning sword to guard the tree of life, keeping humanity from accessing life without redemption. And when Israel built the Ark of the Covenant, it was the image of 2 cherubim that was placed on the cover. The place is called the mercy seat. It's a place where God would descend to judge and to show mercy. They don't speak much. They don't move fast. They are there, silent, steady, unshaken. When the glory of God descends, they are the base. When justice needs a resting place, they are the throne. It is written, "You were the anointed cherub who covers. You were on the holy mountain of God." That was Lucifer, not the serpent, not the original symbol of darkness, but a glorious angel who once stood closest to God, who once lifted heaven's throne with his very heart, who was anointed not to rule but to cover. And then, he wanted to sit upon the Is throne he was created to uphold. Have you ever found yourself becoming what you once served? Have you ever thought you were too high to worship anymore? Lucifer thought so. And from an anointed cherub, he became the screaming shadow in the abyss. Cherubim do not kneel, because they are the throne, but they are not proud, because they know the throne was never theirs. If you are standing near what is holy, don't confuse carrying glory with owning glory. We've just touched the very essence of guarded holiness. And now, we step into the strangest image of all, thrones, the fiery wheels full of eyes. Have you ever heard of the wheel within a wheel, covered in eyes? An image that's not beautiful, not easy to grasp, not easily embraced. But in the Bible, they are sacred thrones, beings that bring down glory without a single word. Thrones are not chairs. They are the living essence of divine authority. No wings, no human face, only motion, unceasing, terrifying, full of eyes. Each eye, a perspective. Each rotation is an act of irreversible holiness. Ezekiel once saw them in a vision. And a wheel inside a wheel, a ring of fire moving, light like glowing crystal. And at the center was life, a living being, a presence. You cannot pray to meet the thrones, because they do not come to meet you. They are the vehicle by which the glory of God moves. When God's throne shifts, they are the wheels beneath. When His presence departs the temple, they are the carriers. They don't bear missions for individuals, they bear the motion of the universe. Many theologians believe thrones are the hidden foundation beneath great events. when truth is overturned yet still triumphs, when justice is done even as all systems collapse, when light shatters fate but no hand can be seen pushing it. That is the thrones working silently, needing no understanding, no mention. And here is the mystery. In the book of Revelation, when John sees the throne of God among countless angels, he no longer sees the wheels, only saw 24 elders kneeling around the throne, throwing their crowns before him. Maybe the thrones changed form so humans could comprehend. Maybe the fiery wheels took on human likeness, so that fragile beings like us could touch a sliver of glory without breaking. Thrones do not need your praise. They are not for your understanding, but for your trembling in holiness. They are the movement of justice, the thunder and the silence. If your life feels like it's spinning out of control, if you feel caught in a wheel of fate, don't rush to conclude that you're being crushed. Maybe you're being carried on a throne to the place God intends, even if your mind cannot follow. We've just completed the first angelic sphere, where beings live solely in glory without direct intervention. Now it's time to descend to the second sphere, where angels begin to touch the world, to coordinate, govern, and battle. Not all angels descend with trumpets and blazing fire. Some were created to operate the heavens like an invisible current. Dominions, the coordinating angels, not messengers, not battlefield warriors. They manage the order, keep balance. They receive commands directly from the divine and quietly pass them down to the lower ranks of angels. They don't look strange like the cherubim. They don't spin like the thrones. They don't burn like the seraphim. They are simple, like an unbreakable law running underneath all things. When you see a king suddenly humble himself, when you witness a leader dare to do what's right despite all pressure, when a culture suddenly turns back toward life, know this: the dominions have placed their hand upon the wheel of history. The Bible doesn't say much about them, because they don't show up to impress. They are quiet like the wind rustling trees during early morning prayer. But when they move, the entire structure of realms must realign. Some ask, if real power exists, why is it silent? Maybe because real power doesn't need to show off. It only needs to be effective. And dominions are divine effectiveness personified. When Ephesians speaks of rulers, powers, and authorities, they are not only talking about humans. They speak of entities governing from behind the veil. Dominions. Ancient theologians believed whenever a command from God is sent down to earth, it is the dominions who carry it without interruption. They are the divine axis, helping lower angels know when to act and helping earthly powers recognize their boundaries. No one prays directly to dominions, no one calls them by name, but if they were to pull their hands away from this world, chaos would swallow even the heavens. You may have never seen them, but maybe it's because of them that you still wake up every morning, in a world not yet collapsed. And if you are a leader, a decision maker bearing the weight of a community, pray to be sensitive to the coordination of the dominions. Not for your glory, but to uphold the spiritual order of the world entrusted to you. They are the silent coordinators of heaven's kingdom. And when they work, you won't hear a sound. You'll only see justice arrive right on time. Next, we meet a different kind of angel. Not a manager, but a bringer of miracles. If you've ever prayed and been healed, if you have ever prayed and been healed, if the light shines through your soul at the moment of your greatest despair, chances are it was the virtues. No blaring trumpets, no shining armor, No scepter or shouted commands, virtues arrive like a thought you can't shake. A tiny glimmer of hope, but it refuses to go out. Something that ignites in the heart, in the night, without reason. Virtues are the bearers of miracles, not the kind meant to impress, but the kind that arrives just before you let go. A silent turning, a healing that happens when you no longer have the strength to ask. A stream running beneath the desert, quiet but just enough to keep you alive. The Bible doesn't mention them often by name, but their traces are found in every improbable rescue, every unbelievable recovery. When a scientist stumbles upon a cure for an incurable disease. When an artist writes a song that makes a whole generation weep. When a simple phrase softens your heart after years of being frozen. It may well be a virtue just passed through. They are described as sparks of light, white, weightless, radiant, yet within them dwells transforming power. They do not carry swords, they carry heaven's beauty. They do not use threats, they use wonder to awaken the soul. Some ancient traditions call them keepers of the light. Not the light of the sun, but the light of what is right when all else is blurred. Some have said, I had lost my faith until my son survived a surgery no one believed in. I was going to end it all until a stranger held my hand and said, I see you. I hadn't prayed in 10 years until I saw that look, and I knew God had not left me. Maybe you've never called their name, but the virtues were always there, awaiting the moment your heart would open. Not every miracle is explosive. Some miracles are whispered. Virtues don't come to leave you speechless. They come to nudge your soul just 1 degree, enough to keep you from the edge. And if right now you are longing for healing, not for your body but your soul, invite the virtues to step in. No need to call them by name, just open your heart. And now we step into a different front line. No more gentleness. Now we enter where angels confront darkness face to face. There are battles that humans never see. No guns, no knives, no corpses. Only a strange silence between temptation and decision. That is where the powers are fighting. They don't come to soothe your emotions. They don't bring sweet promises or grand visions. They come to stop evil right at the edge of your soul. In the second heaven, a realm no longer a pure sanctuary, but not yet the chaos of earth. Powers build a barrier, a barricade against unclean spirits, against dark strategies, against the quiet infiltration of the demonic. Ephesians says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Powers are the elite force in that battle line, not radiant like seraphim, not unshakable like thrones, but the silent bodyguards between the two realms. Some ancient texts believe, whenever someone is about to be lured into betraying their faith, a power stands between Satan's whisper and that person's heart. Not to force them, but to keep the door open a few more seconds. Seconds enough to remember who you once were. Enough to choose truth, even in weakness. When your soul feels weary from constant temptation, maybe it's not because you're weak. Maybe you're standing at the front lines, and a power is holding the darkness from advancing another step. They don't need your thanks. They only need you not to surrender. But the most terrifying truth is this: not all powers remained loyal. Some powers have fallen. They crossed the line, becoming guides for darkness to enter the human heart. And that's when we must face an even more dangerous class of angels. the ones no longer fighting outside the door, but those who have stepped inside the systems of mankind. They are the gatekeepers of nations. Spiritual beings stand behind politics, religion, war, and peace. And if some of them have fallen, then it's not the darkness is knocking. It's already in the boardroom. Not all angels stand behind a single person. Some angels stand behind an entire generation. Principalities, ruling powers that remain unseen. They don't knock on your heart like guardian angels. They whisper into the conscience of an entire people. They don't act on an individual scale. They work at the border between spirit and society, where religion meets politics, where law collides with morality. The boundaries of ethics are redefined each century. When a nation turns back to God, when a leader weeps at their inauguration, when an entire generation chooses life over a culture of death. That is not a coincidence. That is the fingerprint of the principalities. Paul once wrote in Ephesians, so that through the church the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms. The rulers, the principalities, one are watching, and often they are intervening. But not all principalities have held on to their original light. Some powers have fallen, not by openly fighting God like Lucifer, but by ruling in silence. There are cities wrapped in darkness, governments that exist not to serve, but to suffocate the soul. Legal systems that protect what is wrong. Religions that bear God's name but hide demonic shadows. In the book of Daniel, an angel was sent with an answer to a prayer, but he was delayed 21 days by the prince of the kingdom of Persia. A prince, a fallen principality, and only when Michael the Archangel intervened did the prayer finally arrive. That is to say, some places on the earth are ruled by darkness, not demons, but rebellious angels. So don't underestimate the invisible battles in leadership. Don't be naive about supernatural influence over culture, and don't assume that every system is neutral. There is a spiritual realm behind every law, every ideology, every movement. If you are a person who bears the burden of the community, a leader, an educator, or a person standing at a cultural crossroads, pray for your principality. It still holds the original light, and if it no longer does, pray for heaven to send Michael. We are about to enter the lowest level, the place closest to humans, where angels are no longer law-keepers or healers, but invisible companions on your daily journey of faith, beyond the powers guarding kingdoms, beyond the angels who cover sacred thrones. There remains a class of angels, who only appears when history must turn. Archangels, the chief messengers of heaven, not guardian angels, not cosmic administrators. They are sent when heaven decides to intervene, when an era must end, when a new covenant is about to be declared, when darkness believes it has won. They come. These are the names you've heard. Michael, the warrior of justice, commander of heaven's army. Gabriel, the herald of irreversible good news. Raphael, the healer, the angel who walks with you in your restoration. Michael appears in Daniel, Jude, and Revelation. He is the one who stands face to face with Satan, draws the sword of light, and will bind the ancient dragon at the end of days. Gabriel came to Mary while the world was still unready and said, "You will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus." Just one sentence, and the course of human history shifted. Raphael in the book of Tobit didn't appear as a blinding light, but walked with a man through a long journey to heal the blind, and to cast out a demon that haunted a family for generations. Archangels don't need to say much. They only need to show up at the right time. Unlike other high-ranking angels, archangels are called by name in Scripture because their role cannot be mistaken. Some traditions believe there are 7 archangels. Each one carries a domain: Michael, righteous warfare; Gabriel, prophecy; Raphael, healing; Uriel, light and revelation; Raguel, reconciliation; Remiel, resurrection; Sariel, divine justice. While not all are confirmed in the biblical canon, the presence of extraordinary angels for extraordinary moments is undeniable. Archangels are not with you every day. They don't track your every step. They are kept within glory and only released at heaven's command. Where they appear, demons flee. Where they speak, covenants open. Where they fight, timelines shift. You may live your whole life and never see an archangel. But if one day in a dream you hear a voice say, "Do not be afraid. I have been sent from a very high place," then be ready, because something bigger than you is about to be born. Archangels are not sent to comfort you. They come to break you and rebuild you, to mark a turning point in your life that cannot be reversed. But there is still one more kind of angel, not standing high in authority, not fighting on the edge of life and death, but standing right beside you, in the room where you just wept alone, on the road you take to work each morning, by your bedside on sleepless nights. If archangels are the angels of great doors, angels are those who stand at the door every day, not messengers to kings, not warriors of Armageddon. They do only one thing: walk beside you, every step, every minute, every breath. The Bible says the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. And Jesus confirmed, their angels always see the face of my Father in heaven. They see what you hide. They know the mistakes you're about to make. And they do not leave. They don't preach. They don't scold. They don't force. They simply stand there quietly, keeping your soul. When you're about to step across a dangerous line, when you've lost control and pray in desperation, when you open your mouth ready to deny God again, perhaps an angel has just spoken for you. In Genesis 28, Jacob lay asleep in the wilderness, and he saw a ladder stretching from earth to heaven. On it, angels were ascending and descending. They don't leave heaven forever, nor do they stay on earth constantly. They go, they come, they serve, then return. Like a flowing stream between God and man. Someone once asked, if I have a guardian angel, then why do I still get hurt, have accidents, stumble? The answer is, because angels aren't sent to keep you from all pain, but to keep your soul from breaking. When you lose everything, but still have faith. When you walk through fire but are not burned. When you're lost, but never fall out of his hand. It's because your angel was there, and perhaps that angel will never be remembered by name. But they don't need to be known. They only need you to live and believe. Some have said I met a stranger on the road. They knew my name, knew what I was thinking, and then vanished. I was saved from a car crash, but no one was standing beside me. I heard someone whisper, "Don't die," but I was completely alone. Maybe you met an angel and didn't realize it. Hebrews says, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have entertained angels without knowing it. They are still there. No need for light, no need for ceremony. Only a heart still open to heaven. And when we've walked this whole journey through every layer of glory and shadow, seeing angels not just in Scripture but woven into our very lives, One final question still echoes in many hearts. Are angels still active today, in an age of technology, doubt, and science? We've seen their traces, we've felt their breath. But now, what do the scholars, those who live in word and reason, say about them? And up next is where faith meets scholarship, where wise hearts speak, where you will see. Angels are not ancient symbols asleep in dusty texts, but active agents, silent, profound, and present. After all the angelic orders we've just walked through, after every breath that reminded you you're not alone, you may still whisper that familiar question. Are angels still active today? Or are they just sacred symbols, beautiful but unreal? And in that very moment, when your faith trembles between innocence and doubt, the scholars who have lived their lives in God's Word speak up. Dr. Michael Heiser, a theologian specializing in angels in the Old Testament, stated clearly, angels are not poetic imagery. They are structured beings with specific responsibilities in the kingdom, and their ministry continues every single day. Dr. Taylor Marshall, a lifelong Catholic Bible scholar, affirms, if there are still people who need guarding, then there are still angels being sent. The Bible never said that the role of angels has ended. It's we who stopped listening. Ravi Zacharias, a defender of faith in a world driven by reason, once shared, you don't need to see an angel to believe they're working. Often it's the quietest intervention that speaks the loudest. N.T. Wright, Anglican bishop and New Testament scholar, said in a moving sermon, angels are the link between the visible and invisible worlds. You don't need to understand them. That's okay. But if you ignore their presence, you're missing one of the most vibrant parts of God's reality. And when these voices, from Catholic to Protestant, from the academy to the pulpit, all affirm the ongoing presence of angels, we are left with no reason to doubt. Only one thing left to do. Open your eyes, open your heart, and learn to recognize their footprints. If you've ever escaped an accident that should have claimed your life, if you've ever received a word at exactly the impossible moment, if you've ever heard a whisper in the night, maybe an angel just passed by you, not to be recognized, just letting you know that you have been seen. And after all these revelations from Scripture, from experience, from the voices of scholars, we return to the beginning, not in theory, but in the heart that longs for something beyond understanding. After the scholars have spoken, after theology and experience have been woven into a living, sacred tapestry, we no longer ask, are angels real? We begin to ask, so where am I in this grand picture? And the answer often brings the humble to tears. You are not outside, you are not beneath, you are at the very center. The air you breathe is the battleground where angels and darkness clash. The smallest decisions you make could activate a command from heaven. A tearful prayer could cause an angel to break ranks and descend. The book of Daniel tells us, that is because one man chose to fast and pray, an angel was sent from heaven, but was delayed by an invisible power for 21 days, until Michael the Archangel intervened. One man's prayer shook 2 realms of heaven. So what do you believe about your prayers today? What do you believe about the battles you're fighting silently, unseen? What if every tear, every groan too deep for words, doesn't fall into the void, but onto the wings of the angel guarding you? Live as if you are being guarded, because you truly are. Share this video, not just to spread knowledge, but to awaken another soul that's grown weary and fallen asleep. Leave a comment not just to say what you think, but to rewrite the moments when you were rescued, preserved, or touched. And if you haven't subscribed to Prayer Station yet, do it today. Because here, we don't tell Bible stories to entertain, but to awaken those who thought they had been forgotten. You are standing in the middle of a spiritual battlefield, but you are not fighting alone. There are angels still guarding you in the night. And there is one who gave himself so that not one of us would walk in loneliness. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. And if today you hear that calling, don't hesitate. Step toward the light. Prayer Station, where stories are not just meant to be heard, but to become life. Are you ready?